Hi, my name is Sarah, and welcome to the Tansy Knits podcast. Um, Mostly about knitting, but I do other crafty, fibery related things too, which I'll mention when it comes up. Um, I have been a knitter for most of my life. Knit off and on as a kid, often knitting my own accessories and adapting patterns to work in the round and stuff like that, and improvising a lot. Um, I sort of really got into knitting in a big way when the stitching books came out in the early 2000s, and sort of upped my game and learned that there were different cast-ons and different kinds of techniques for doing things, and made my first sweater. I then briefly moved to the UK for a year abroad, where I lived and worked in London, England. Um, and then I moved back to Canada and moved to across the country to Montreal, um, where I really dug into knitting and discovered knitting on the internet. And this was the early days of Ravelry, and decided that I should blog, and here we are. I've been watching podcasts for a couple years and decided I should add my voice to that. Um, yeah. So I'll start with some stuff that I've finished recently. Um, a friend of mine in Montreal and I have, for the past couple years, knit the Stephen West mystery shawl for the fall. And so this year I've recently finished my Starflake, which is enormous and quite warm. This was using some stash yarn that I had acquired. This dark purple is from a local mohair farm, and it's a mohair wool blend, and she sells at the Strathcona Market here in Edmonton. And the other color is Manos del Uruguay Marina in Lavanda, which I bought on a trip out to BC. And yeah, I didn't do the extended border because was kind of tired of the miles and miles of garter stitch, but that's okay. I did do this striped I-cord, which is a little intense to do, but I do really like the look of it. So overall, I'm really happy with this shawl. It is officially the biggest shawl I've ever knit, and it'll be great for when it gets really cold in January and February here in Edmonton, where it gets, quite cool temperatures. Um, the next thing that I've recently knit, I've sort of been participating in the Crimson Whip Along, and uh, inspired by somebody who finished an FO from the 80s, or finished a project that had been going on since the 80s when her son was like a toddler. I drug out my oldest whip, which is a cardigan I started in 2007. And this is from yarn that I had dyed myself using icing colors, so food coloring dyes. And I think I had all the pieces ready to go, but I think I put it down because there's all this fading that has happened. And I feel like this probably started when I was working on it, and I kind of got discouraged and didn't know what to do about it. But, and I've changed sizes since 2007, so it doesn't really fit me anymore. But it fits my mom, who I'm living with at the moment, my parents. So it's gonna go to her, and she doesn't mind the fading. I was gonna try and over dye it with indigo, but she likes it how it is and doesn't want me to do anything to it. So that's that. And I got these nice little gray shell buttons for it, which I think complete it quite nicely. So that's really nice to have finished. Yeah, that is like my oldest work. My next oldest work in progress is from 2009, I believe. So I think I'm gonna, that one has a bit more stuff to do on it, so I think I'll leave that for Stash Dash next year. Another project that I finished recently was a pair of socks. These also are for my mom. And these are improvised striped socks. I've knit lots and lots of pairs of socks in my life, so I kind of have my own recipe of what I do. And yeah, I really like the fit of a flap and gusset heel flap and gusset. So I usually put that into all of my socks. And my mom's really into the contrasting heels and toes, so yeah, so this worked out quite well. The sort of greeny mustardy color is Monzim sock yarn from Retrosaria, and the pink is a Sandsgarn Sisu, which they're actually really good gauge matches for each other. And these are a little bit bagged out because she's been wearing them the past couple days, but they're still good socks. They're still presentable. And what am I working on recently? So, a couple years ago, I went with my parents down to southern Alberta, and we visited the Custom Woolen Mills, which is sort of near Carstairs, like partway to Calgary from Edmonton. And the Custom Woolen Mill is one of the few mills in Canada, the wool mills in Canada, and they have a traditional mule spinner set up, and they have a shop where they sell lots of their yarns. And I had seen this wonderful bat that, I don't have a picture of it, I don't think. It was just this wonderful big giant bat meant for felting, in this glorious sort of mauvey color. This glorious mauvey color, mauvey gray. And you guys see it better here in the stockinette part. And I just fell in love with it and was like, I need to spin that. So this is my first ever sweater spin that I completed last year. It took me about a year to do. I'm not the most ambitious spinner. I don't spin a lot, I guess. I don't have a great setup where I am right now. But I made a traditional 3-ply and spun, it was about a pound of fiber. So I split it into 2-ounce bundles and then spun each bundle onto a bobbin, and had to buy extra bobbins to be able to complete this project. And then did what is recommended to do, which is ply your bobbins sort of in cycles, so that you're not plying like the first bobbin that you spun with the second bobbin that you spun. So I plied the first bobbin with the third bobbin with the 9th bobbin, and then sort of combined it from there, and continued that for all of the yarns that I did. And then with the leftovers of the final bits of the bobbin, I chain plied them, and then that was what I ended up using, the chain ply part, for my swatching. And so if I need extra yarn, which I think I'm in good shape for skeins for this project, I might take out the swatch and use that yarn, but I'm not sure that it's necessary. So the project that I'm working on is the Parisian Dreams pullover by Mina Philipp, and I've already split for the sleeves. I'm going for more of a cropped length, and because I have a short torso, Mina's probably quite a bit taller than me. And so I've been knitting that. I've finished all the lace bottom part, and I've finished the front neck shaping and the shoulders, and I'm just working on the back at the moment, and it's kind of cruising along. So maybe I can get that finished for the whip along. I don't know. Next we have another pair of socks. As I am a master's student, I have lots of readings to do, and I have discovered that if I knit while I read, I actually can pay a lot better attention to what's going on, and I don't get so bored that I fall asleep, which is, during my undergraduate degree is a fine arts degree, so there wasn't a lot of reading of academic articles involved, although there were some. So when I started my MLIS, there was lots of academic reading, and if I try and just take notes while I'm reading, I spend all my time writing everything down, and I don't cruise through the article at a reasonable pace. So I decided to try knitting while reading, and that has really helped. And if there's something that's noteworthy, I can pause what I'm doing, write it down, and then go back to what I was doing. I got a book stand. M to the third did a little mini episode on how to knit while reading and what you would need to sort of help with that. And so on her I was just sort of balancing a book and peering over on my own, and having weights on it and stuff like that to try and make it work with what I was knitting, or just printed off articles. And her suggestion of getting a book stand has really been a game changer for me with knitting with reading. And I can either use it with my iPad and have digital articles, or have the printed articles standing up. And it's helped a lot with, not getting a sore back from leaning over too much. Or, it works with books too. And so the project that my semester is over for this year, but I still have my project that I was working on. This is a Christmas sock, again for my mom. It's just, I do knit lots for my family. It's sort of my way of thanking them for allowing me to live at home rent-free and assisting me with this career transition. And a person can only have so many knit socks. You only have one pair of feet to wear them on a daily basis, so you can only wear so many socks before they need to be washed, and then once they're washed, you've got them back again. So I've been making socks for sort of increasing group of people. And I knit my socks myself. I don't have a sock machine or anything. These are out of Stranded Dye Works. This is the Christmas colorway for this year, called Gingerbread Haus, with a coordinating red mini that she had dyed. I got these from her pre-order. I think that was in November. I can't remember. I already knit myself a pair of Christmas socks out of this yarn, and as I like sort of a shorter sock, and I have small feet. I'm a 6.5. So there's enough usually in a skein of yarn, especially if I'm doing contrast heels and toes, that I can make 2 pairs. So these ones are going to be a little bit different than mine. Mine have contrasting heels and toes. My mom is going to have contrasting cuffs and heels. So hopefully that'll be enough to tell them apart. I suppose, well, I didn't really talk about what kind of needles I like. Personally, my philosophy is you should try different needles and see what you like to work with. For many years, I worked with metal needles, not realizing that there were other materials that needles could be from. And when I discovered wood needles, I loved them, and I have a good collection of wood and bamboo needles. However, when it comes to double points, wood needles, I are you need to handle them a little bit delicately, especially this is like a 2.25 millimeter, so that's quite fine, and they get really bendy and brittle. So I decided, and I mean, I have some metal needles, but they're not my favorite. I find them too slippery. I don't really like the little clicking that they do when you're knitting. Yeah, it's sort of a sensory thing that I am not a fan of. So I gave a try to, these are, what are the Carbons needles, and I quite like them because they have this sort of the less slick surface of a wooden DPN. They have a good point still. They have a good point. Not too sharp, not too pointy. And they're quite strong. You don't really feel like you're gonna break these easily. So yeah. And I go back and forth between knitting magic loop and knitting with DPNs. It's kind of whatever I feel like casting on at that moment, or whatever I have lying around. For what I use for magic loop, I have some Leica needles that are, 2.25 is my go-to size for socks. For most of the time, unless it's really fine, I'll go down to a 2 millimeter. I'm in Canada, so I work in millimeters. I'm sorry. I worked in a yarn store briefly in Montreal, and French knitters also work in millimeters, so I've never really had to do much conversion. If it's an issue, I can make an effort to learn the US sizes for needles. Yeah, so I have Leica, I have a Chowgu needle that I use, I have a Addy Turbo Sock Rocket, I think. I like all of those, and I use them regularly. Yeah, so you'll probably see those popping up. The final sort of active project that I've got going on, I'm not going to go through all my sort of hibernating projects, because that's a lot of digging around, and I don't want to really admit to how many I have. I mean, I listed it all out on Ravelry, and it's about 12, so it's not so scary, but that's only knitting projects. That's not including quilting projects or like cross stitch projects. I only have one cross stitch project, but I think I have like 3 or 4 quilt projects in progress, and they can't all be finished in a reasonable time. One of them is a paper pieced hexagon project. Oh, which I can show you some hexagons, I guess. I'll show it to you sometime. It's almost finished. It is out of this size of hexagon, which I kind of made up. It is an assortment of various fat quarters that I collected, mostly featuring like these sort of interesting greens. There's some aquas. I like dots. I like stripes. And I've added in some scraps. It has a little bit of Liberty fabrics in it. This was kind of an interesting fat quarter that I got. So, like feed sack, reproduction. So it's mostly these sort of pastel-y kind of colors. And that's one of my projects that I started in 2009. It is near completion, but I'm not at the point of really working on it at the moment. I kind of pick it up and put it down here and there. So my last active knitting project is also my most recent cast on, and it is a cardigan that I think I first saw on Ellie of the Skandir podcast probably like a year ago or something. And it's a Rama design sweater, colorwork sweater that is 2 colors, and they have an English translation that's that you can download from. It's linked on Ravelry. I will link to my Ravelry project pages for these projects. I really love Ravelry in terms of tracking what I'm working on. So I usually, either when I cast on or soon after I cast on, I keep records of what I'm doing. I don't always keep like a lot of notes of what I'm doing, but I try to at least put the basic information and link to the pattern. So this is what I have so far. And I have been working it with a Norwegian thimble, which I didn't bring down. I guess I should have done that. It's like a little wire thing with 2 loops off of it, so you can hold it on your left or whatever. I suppose you could use it with your right hand if you're right hand dominant. I personally knit continental. I learned English style when I first learned to knit, but in like 2007-ish time, when I first encountered the knitting intranet and sort of I was really sort of interested in exploring all kinds of new techniques and different cast-ons, and that's when I decided to try knitting continental. I had known somebody who worked at a yarn store who knit continental, and she really recommended it for knitting ribbing really efficiently because it's a smaller movement to switch the yarns from knit to purl. And so I had embarked on knitting a pair of ribbed socks for a friend at the time, and I decided to try it, and I made myself knit continental for this pair of knee socks. And it's really hard to learn a new technique, because you know your own efficient way of doing it, like your other hand already knows the movement. But I would switch back to throwing for a while, and then I would go, no, you have to do continental. And throughout that project, I really came to love knitting continental and found that it alleviated some wrist pain that I would experience from working on a computer with a mouse and then knitting in the evening. You can get some like wrist fatigue, and I found with knitting continental some more balance between my 2 hands, and so I switched, and I haven't really looked back. Although in the past I've knit Colorwork 2-handed with decent results, but again, I like to experiment and try new things and try new techniques, and I love a good thimble, so I found one and gave it a try. It was really frustrating at first, but I watched a video to see that I was probably threading the yarn through the thimble improperly, so it wasn't feeding well. And so I've in a few evenings, probably maybe 3 or 4 evenings, I already have this much of the body, and I just cruise along. I wouldn't say that I'm a super fast knitter, but I get a good amount of knitting time, and I can cruise along pretty good. So I am not displeased with my output of knitted material. So okay, right, yarns, right? So I am using, again, stash. I'm trying to use, I do buy yarn. It does happen. I don't plan to show you how much I buy, because, not that I like buying yarn. I like having a good, healthy stash. My stash is very healthy. And, you'll see it when I use it. How's that? Okay? So what I'm using is some yarns that I've had in the stash for quite a while. When I first discovered, in the early 2000s, when I discovered yarn stores here in Edmonton, I really got into Briggs & Little, which is another Canadian-produced yarn from the Maritimes, and it is quite reasonably priced. This is Briggs & Little Sport. I also loved gray. I still love gray, but I'm trying to use more colors because gray gets a little much. If I don't want to be all gray. I live in a world where, you know, everybody has a black winter coat and it's just really somber. So I think color is a good thing. So this is one from an old sweater quantity of Briggs & Little in, I think, sheep's gray. They have varying shades of gray, and like at the time, I'm not sure what the price of Briggs & Little is these days, but when I bought this, I think it was about $6 for 430 yards or something like that. That's not bad. You need like maybe 4 for a sweater. That's not bad. It's rustic. It's not merino. It's a single ply, which is working fine with my Colorwork. And this is from once upon a time when I had an idea for a sweater pattern that I never really followed through with. And the yarn needs to be used because it's a fabulous color. It is. This is Jameson of Shetland DK Knitting in the color fuchsia. I don't remember the color number offhand, but it'll be in my Ravelry project. And despite this one being called a DK and this one being called a sport, they actually pair up quite nicely in the finished fabric. And do I have the swatch? I do have the swatch. I swatched in 2 other colors of the yarn because I don't have a lot of extra in my main colors. But you can see, like, this has been blocked. It makes a really nice fabric, and it softens up quite a bit with washing, and yeah, I think they sit well with each other in dominance or whatever. And I'm trying to also keep my gauge nice and loose so that it's not too rigid a fabric, which I think I achieved pretty well with the swatch. So that's going along pretty nicely. And that's kind of all my active knitting projects at the moment. I try not to have too many things going at once, just for my own, like, I mean, it's a personal thing, right? You have to be comfortable with your crafting. I know I have lots of projects on the go in various crafting methods, and it's like it can be a certain amount of anxiety and inducement from having too many things going at once. So I don't try to limit myself, but I cruise along on one or another, or if I'm bored with that one, have something to switch to. But I usually cruise along on one thing at a time for a few evenings or something like that until I get good progress. Like, I've really been cruising on the Parisian Dreams sweater, so in the past week or so, and it's getting good progress on it, and I might work on it till I finish it, or that now that I've said that, I'll probably want to work on something completely different, and I might cast something on or work on a pair of socks. I don't know. I worked in an ad agency for many years, and I was a production artist. So having specific deadlines and assignments of things to do makes me rebel, and that's definitely something I don't want my crafting to be, is very deadline driven. So it's kind of like, I'll finish it when I finish it, and yeah, that's it. So when I knit something for somebody else, when I'm going to gift it to them, I will let them know that I'm working on it, and I will show them the yarn to make sure that they like it. And it'll be done when it'll be done, and that's it. So I am planning to make Christmas socks for my family. They will not be done for Christmas. They will be done after Christmas or whenever I feel like making them. And my family is okay with that. Because they're still getting something handmade, even if it's not, you know, in time for a specific day. Yeah, so that's all my knitting at the moment. I was going to talk a little bit about books because, you know, I am a librarian in training, and this is going to be my life. So what are my current books that I have going? Yes, I have a few books going at the moment. And I even, like, finished one that I had while these ones were going. That's okay. I've sort of been, not super satisfied with what I've been reading lately, so I've been sort of switching around to different books, and I've decided that it's okay to just not finish a book. And yeah, because I mean, if you're not in the mood for it, you're not in the mood for it. Maybe you'll pick it up again another day, maybe you won't. There's lots of books, and that's okay. And it's not the fault of the author. It's not anybody's fault. It's just, it's not the right time for that book. So the book that I recently abandoned was Anne Rice's Queen of the Damned. I have read Interview with a Vampire and The Vampire Lestat, which I both really enjoyed when I read them. And I thought that I'd be in the mood for Queen of the Damned, but I'm kind of not. So I'll just leave that for now, and I might pick it up later, but I don't have to. So what I'm reading right now is Look Alive Out There by Sloane Crosley. I have read Crosley's other books, which include I Was Told There'd Be Cake, which I really enjoyed. How Did You Get This Number? Also enjoyed. And a novel called The Clasp, which was also really good. This one, I'm not sure, maybe I'm just not in the mood for, like, New York life essays. I don't know. I think I'm going to make myself finish this one in time for taking it back to the library. Because, like, they're kind of interesting. I'm kind of not in the mood, but I can do it, I think. It's not such a stretch. I also am an avid reader of comics and have been since the movie for Ghost World came out way back when. I discovered at that time, like, you know, alternative comics, and like I was like, oh, this is a comic. This movie's so weird. This is amazing, and kind of exactly how I feel. I mean, I was in my early 20s, so it really spoke to me at that time. And so then I read the comic, and then I tried to make everything in my life be about comics. This was during my undergrad, which I did a Bachelor of Design, studying graphic design. And so I made as many projects as I could about comics. I made a research project and the report into a comic, which, you know, you can do in design. I did like a history of comics research project, and yeah, developed a comic book character and like different drawing styles. I was really into it. So I've been reading comics since then. When I lived in Montreal, I got into reading what they call floppies, because many comics come out in single issue magazine format, you know, like the comics people associate with like children from the 1940s, when comics became a really big thing and superheroes and stuff like that. But my favorite comics are still like indie comics. They're not really underground anymore. But my local public library, the Edmonton Public Library, has a really great collection of comics for all ages. And so anything that I would buy from a comic book store in single issue format, I can get as like a trade paperback version of that comic. So as a student, I don't have a lot of money to be buying comics, so it's really great that I can still keep up on a lot of interesting titles. And so what I'm reading another book that I'm reading at the moment is The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which was made into a Netflix show. Oh, I suppose I should take, you don't need to see my library card number. Yeah, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And they had done, this same author had done a version of like a spin-off title of Archie called Afterlife with Archie, where it's like they're zombies or something. I don't know, I haven't read that one. The art was done by one of my favorite comic book artists, and so I have to check that out at some point. And they're kind of zombies, I think. Anyway, this one is like witches, right? Because Sabrina is witches. And so far, I'm really enjoying the art. Sorry if that's really, I mean, it's kind of a horror comic, so it might be a little violent in some spots. Anyway, for me, having come from a fine arts background, the art is as important as the words. So, yeah, I'm really enjoying the art in this comic. And, yeah, I look forward to finishing it. A comic that I picked up, I wasn't sure what it was about when I picked it up. It just, the cover looks interesting, and yes, I am a librarian that will judge a book by its cover because I have a graphic design background and I know that that's a thing that sells a book. So I got this book, Hot Comb, from my library again. It's a drawn-in quarterly title, which drawn-in quarterly I really enjoy, and I used to go to their bookstore often. They print and they have a really great curated bookstore. If you're going to go to Montreal and want a good bookstore, I would recommend going to see theirs. And this is a book by Ebony Flowers, and it's a series of short stories related to black female hairstyling, or sort of related to black hair. And I'm trying to be more diverse in my reading, and I really enjoyed this book because growing up as a white person with straight hair, I never really had hair trauma necessarily. Trauma is not maybe the right word, but no, there was no like political affiliations with whatever hairstyle I was wearing. Maybe that's not the right, or political implications, I guess, would be the right description of it. And yeah, it doesn't take, I mean, the longest it ever took me to get my hair styled was when I bleached it and dyed it strange colors, such as pink or purple. But again, that's something that I was able to choose to do, and not something that could be required by the nature of my hair. So it was interesting to get a bit of insight into what goes into styling black hair. And like one of the stories is about this I think the person's first experience of having their hair relaxed and the process of doing that. And I mean, when I go to the hairdresser, I usually just get a haircut, so that's like maybe an hour. If you get your hair dyed, it's maybe 2 hours, but I can't imagine spending like all day at the hairdresser getting braids or having your hair chemically treated to be relaxed. That's pretty epic. So, I mean, not that I don't know what that experience is like, but I got a little bit of insight into what's involved. Yeah, so I recommend that one. It was a good read. And yeah, I guess that's about it from me. Yeah. Hi. welcome. Welcome to my bedroom. Welcome. And this is like my comic bookcase. As you can see, there's a bit more that can actually fit in the bookcase, so I should probably start another one. And yeah. Hi. Thanks for watching.